From the WATE.com Digital Center, your legal questions. This is Ask Isaacs. Now, here's Lori Tucker and attorney Greg Isaacs.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for being with us. I'm Lori Tucker along with our legal analyst Greg Isaacs. Hope you're staying warm. Thank you for making it in.
It's good to finally be here today.
Yeah, you know, really, I-40 has been looking okay in spots, but still authorities are saying, you know what, be very careful.
Be very careful, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about.
That's what we're talking about today. You know, you see people out on the main roadways. You don't think maybe, unless you're stuck indoors wanting to get out, that a lot of our side roads, people's driveways, their workplaces are still covered in snow and ice. So we're going to talk today about liability. Who gets in trouble if somebody gets hurt? Let's first, Greg, talk about car wrecks. You have a fender bender on the ice.
Well,
what constitutes when you get in trouble?
And today is a good example of how the standard of care can change rapidly. So, you know, let's talk about it. It's very basic but very complicated. Under Tennessee law, you have a duty to use reasonable care, Lori, when you operate your vehicle on the roadway. And
Which is true every day, obviously.
True every day. But, you know, when you have snow and when you have ice, when you have torrential rain, you have a duty to use reasonable care under the circumstances.
And this law goes back to 1941. It's
to
been
1941.
around for a while.
So remember, a duty to use reasonable care means that on days like today when the speed limit says 45, and you go to court and you say, hey, I was going the speed limit, I lost control, that's not the legal test. The test is, are you operating your vehicle in a safe and reasonable manner under the circumstances? And, you know, so in your neighborhoods, 25 miles an hour doesn't mean 25 miles an hour.
On the hill
today.
in my neighborhood, I went 3 miles an hour. 3
and
miles
you were
an
still
hour.
Probably going too fast. and let me tell you how the courts have broken this down. You know, if you do have an automobile accident, you know, they look at whether you breached your duty of care, whether you have a duty, whether you breached it, whether you or the weather was the cause. So, you know,
how tough is that
courts,
to prove?
Well, courts really break it down. And think about this. They look at your speed under the circumstances. They look at whether you were braking gradually. And cases actually do a good job of setting this out. Whether you were braking gradually or slamming on your brakes.
Which you should never do. We know
never
this.
do. Whether you used reasonable care in controlling your car if it started.
Were you following too close? We're
traction.
seeing that.
So all those different things are factored in to determine if you breach that duty of care. But at the end of the day, what our Tennessee Supreme Court has said, you know, weather is not alone in and of itself a factor that would exclude negligence, but it's also something that doesn't give you a pass. So if you're driving in a reasonable manner and you lose control and you have an accident, hope it doesn't happen, and the weather's the cause, then you're not liable. So just know, you know, the courts kind of employ common sense. In a lot of cases, they don't. But you have to conduct yourself and drive differently to and from work, to and from school as we get out and navigate the roadways around Knox County.
And we do see this. I saw this today. We were talking about it in the newsroom, the fact that people do tend to go a little fast when the roads seem to be clear and ride up right there on your tailpipe. And that can be a little disconcerting. Well, so, you know, if you have a wreck, you hit a patch and they hit you.
And they do, and today's a good example of the legal pitfalls when you're operating your vehicle, because the main thoroughfares are they've been salted, they've been cleared. You know, we had a UT basketball game last night, so you know those roads are pristine.
And you went to that, yes?
And I was there, and enjoyed it immensely. But you know, once you get off the main roads, you get in the tertiary roads, then suddenly you see the ice, you see the snow. Even though they've been plowed, there's still accumulation. So, you know, you're using reasonable care and going the speed limit on Kingston Pike, you turn off the road. You know, that's when you need to use your judgment and drive in a prudent and cautious manner, because the courts say, hey, like when you put your car in snow mode, snow and ice mode,
Yep.
you've got to put your your brain and your conduct in the same thing. So
Now, if you don't, before we move on to other issues with snow and ice, what can the punishment be?
well, you know, if you
What do you
if
face?
you think about this, it's basically a civil issue 9 times out of 10. So, you know, if you have a duty of care, which you do, you breach that duty, and your breach was the cause of someone's damages, then you would be liable. But the good thing is, the fortunate thing, if you're using reasonable care, driving in a prudent and cautious manner under the circumstances, then you're not liable. So just know that. Slow
The courts
down.
just have to determine
These-
that.
And that's why experts make a lot of money. But just know, you know, be extra vigilant, be
Okay.
extra cautious, and you know, you also have to be a good driver. This isn't a time for people that are maybe too young, too old, maybe have some impairments, because the cases really break it down.
Yeah,
Did you
interesting.
control your car when it kind of careened out of control?
Did
in
you
a
know what
reasonable
to
manner?
do?
Did you know what to do?
Yeah.
So just know when
Good
you
point.
leave your driveway, you need to be extra cautious as we're dealing with these heavy snow and ice accumulations.
One thing that scares me, and I bet you guys, I bet this is at the top of your list if you're watching, you hit black ice. You know, you're going as slow as you can, you're trying to be careful, but that can just pop up and be right there, and before you know it, you're in trouble.
And you are. And some plaintiffs' lawyers learned the hard way that's not a breach of your duty to use reasonable care, because think about it, black ice by definition is not a roadway hazard that you would know to use reasonable care under the circumstances.
Yeah.
It's something that's not apparent until you're there.
It's unavoidable, I guess.
It's
That would be
unavoidable. And again,
premise.
if you're driving reasonably under the circumstances, you are not liable, and you've used reasonable care in weather. So, you know, black ice is a good juxtaposition versus, you know, when you're driving down that neighborhood road and you see the ice, you see that 3 miles an hour may
That's
be
as
too
fast
fast,
as I
Miss
went
Tucker.
today.
Yeah. So
I
but-
can't go any slower.
But black ice, if it's unforeseen, typically the courts will not hold you liable for
Yeah.
breaching your duty to drive in a cautious and prudent manner.
Couldn't have been prevented. Okay. Let's move on, because we have seen in our coverage over the past few days Good Samaritans. We saw a guy in a pickup, a Ram 2500 pickup, helping 2 semis get unstuck. You know, we're seeing other things like that. We're seeing on Facebook as well, people giving shouts out to folks who've stepped up and used their vehicle to go get folks. There is a Good Samaritan law, but when can being good bite you?
Well, the short version is under Tennessee law, we have a Good Samaritan law. That's
Yeah.
actually the name of the law. And you are immune from liability if you render aid to somebody and you do not commit an act of gross negligence, or you're not someone that's under a duty to perform the assistance, such as a EMT or a first responder.
A doctor,
Yeah,
yeah.
then they're at a higher level. But if you stop and help, and you stop and render aid, try to help somebody, you are immune from liability under Tennessee law unless you did something way at a pale. That
Even
was
someone
gross
like
negligence.
me with no medical experience, and you may drive by a situation, and this has happened to me before, nothing bad happened, but you know, you see a wreck, you stop, you go, what can I do? Can I help you? You don't want to make the situation worse.
For
What if you do
example,
so and you don't mean
if
to?
if you move someone help them out of the roadway,
Yeah.
help them get out of their vehicle, you would be immune from liability under Tennessee's Good Samaritan law. If you did something, you know, beyond the pale, like tried to perform a tracheotomy, obviously that's
Goodness.
gross negligence. So just know.
Thanks
you
for
know,
spelling it out for
if,
us.
If you're watching one of the medical shows, St. Elsewhere, whatever,
And you
don't
think you can do it?
You think you can do it? You know, don't watch Law and Order. Think you can be a lawyer? Don't watch those shows. Just
Grey's Anatomy was my favorite, but anyway.
reasonable care. So
Okay.
just know, and you know, one good thing that we see when we have inclement weather like this, East Tennessee is just jam-packed with Good Samaritans. People
Yep.
pulling people
Every
out of the ditches.
time.
I've seen it the last few days. people rendering aid, and they're not worried about whether they're going to be sued. You know,
They jump in.
can you sign this release before I tow you out? No, they jump in with their hearts first.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing that our legislature has given us that legal protection.
We'd love to see that. All right, thanks for clearing that up for anybody who had any questions about that. Now, the snow and ice on, let's say, our driveway. I was talking with our news director about that. He said, what about your driveway? What about neighborhoods? You know, somebody comes over to bring you some cookies, they slip and fall on your driveway. Are you liable?
Well, generally, no. And you know what? Businesses, individuals, you don't have a duty to monitor the weather and take proactive steps, like put salt and things out. If you have noticed that inclement weather may be coming, so Kim Weathers, just know that your prognostications don't trigger legal duties here in the state of Tennessee. But
That takes some pressure off.
And the courts have said, hey, snow and ice are just natural occurrences that really don't hold somebody liable. But generally, the legal standard is what you would do if it was any other hazard. So what they look at is in terms of your liability, how long the accumulation of snow and ice has been there. Would it be feasible to remove the accumulation? How much would the cost be, and how foreseeable would it be that someone could get injured? So you know,
That's fair.
the other thing is, if you are a private person, you have a duty to use reasonable care. If you are a business, you have business invitees, you are held to a higher standard and duty under Tennessee law. So you need to make sure you call your services that maintain your property. And you know, if it's been there a day, 2 or 3, and there's patches of ice, then the law would impose a duty to do it. Now, if it's overwhelming and the cost would be prohibitive, no. But just know, after a few days, a duty does kind of trigger if you think that someone foreseeably could get hurt. So just know, but John Q. Public, snow and ice in your driveway, it's just one of the things that are expected.
Okay, there you go. We want to touch on this too, because a lot of people often have questions about this. I know many businesses in our area are closed today. Some are starting to reopen. We're seeing grocery stores, convenience stores, some drugstores are open. But when it comes to employment and dangerous conditions out there, can an employer here's the question I ask you every time, can an employer make you come to work in bad conditions, or otherwise fire you if you say, no, it's not safe, I can't come in?
Tennessee is an employment at will state. What does that mean? Unless you have an employment contract, you can be fired at the will of your employer unless you are protected by age, race, sex, gender, handicap, etc., some specific statute. Now, you know, if you have an accident during the scope of your employment, then the employer could be liable under the doctrine of respondeat superior. Now, you know, can they make you go to work? It just means you're vicariously liable. Okay. You've got somebody doing something, for example, someone driving a Channel 6 SAT truck, you know, and they have a wreck, you know, then the company would be part of whatever. So, but in terms of, can your employer make you, sure, they could, but if it's an extreme situation, in theory, they could be liable. But you know, with all the things that we've seen, you know, we saw employers on the hot seat when we talked about vaccines, vaccinations.
Yes.
What can your employer
It's kind of along the same
mandate
lines.
you do? But you know, it really, I don't know that I have ever encountered personally or in reading some of the decisions, a case where an employer has compelled someone to come in during dangerous, inclement weather. Now,
And speaking of Channel 6, let me just say, we know the risks involved. It's our responsibility. We take it very seriously to let you all know what's going on. So we know, you know, you take the safety precautions and things like that. But just letting you know that, yeah, we're not really in this group per se, because we already know the inherent risks.
right, and that's
Unless it's something
that's a
extreme.
good example, because you know, when we see these inclement weather, when we see these acts of God, these tremendous storms, you know, we want to turn on the TV and feel safe and get information from WATE. We want to be able to turn on our social media and say, you know, if there's a public service announcement not to drive, we want to know about it. So that's a great example when you juxtapose, I need everyone here, and there's people that don't have the responsibility to be here, knowing I've got to be able to navigate in inclement weather. For example, healthcare professionals, there is an expectation that when there's weather like this, that you're going to have to go to the ER.
Yeah.
If my doctor friends and whatever, they drive weather-friendly vehicles. So that's an expectation. But on the other hand, if you're a business that is not disaster weather driven, and you compel someone to go in an extreme situation, there could be some liability. But again, it's very rare that employers tell people to come in at situations when it's not safe. What you typically see with 27 shades of gray between black and white, where it gets dicey, is the employee that sees ice when there is none. So sometimes they have to say, "Hey, the great thaw has happened.
Yes,
we need to get to the office.
Please come to work." Hey, before we run out of time, there's some random facts and Tennessee laws that we need to talk about a little bit. And one is common sense. We still see it every year, and that is it's Tennessee law. You cannot attach sleds to vehicles. Please don't do this.
And you think that's just one of those things. It would be like legislating you shouldn't jump off a water tower.
Correct.
Common sense, but believe it or not, people still get ropes, other things, and they put tie someone to the back of a gator. They do skiing, whatever, and it is incredibly dangerous. And it is a crime under Tennessee law.
It's a misdemeanor. Class C. I like reading this too. It says no person riding upon any bicycle, roller skate, sled, or toy vehicle shall attach said bicycle, roller skates, etc., to that person's own body to any streetcar or vehicle upon a roadway.
Well, our Tennessee legislature, they took all the fun out of sledding illegally here because they have contemplated every possible scenario where you could tow someone on a sled, whatever, down a hill in the snow.
We also have operating a vehicle without good windshield wipers.
That's one of those.
That's a crime.
That's one of those crimes that I would really like to know if someone's ever given somebody a ticket or a citation for an insufficient
Look into that,
wiper.
will ya?
But just know it's against the law. It's like you can
They're
only
important.
And one crime that there's an epidemic of here in East Tennessee that goes uncharged day after day is using your horn for non-emergency purposes. So I want to self-report Sharm Allen in the DA's office. If you're watching, I am a serial offender of that obsequious Tennessee law.
You
But
honk
you
at
probably
people.
you're not a honker, I would estimate.
Only if my safety or that of my children or grandchildren is at risk.
That's excellent.
They will
Okay.
become honked at. Yes, and it has happened. And then I smile. You do your best. Okay, failing to exercise due care or reckless driving. This falls under, we know what reckless driving is, obviously. You think of weaving and being on your phone, all those things. This is not scraping the windshield so you could see. And we were talking about this in our meeting, our editorial meeting this morning, about seeing so many cars that may have cleaned off their windshields from the snow and scraped and all that, but the top of their cars have this much snow. That can be dangerous on the roadway.
It could be, but again, when we look at the complexity of all these laws and the standard of care and the duties, whether it's operating a motor vehicle, whether it's keeping your premises safe, whatever, the one constant is you have a duty to use reasonable care under the circumstances.
So if that snow flew off and obstructed the view of the person behind you, they ended up spinning out of control and wrecking, you'd get in trouble
again,
or no?
let's look at the elements of negligence. Do you have a duty to use reasonable care? Yes, operating your vehicle.
Yeah.
Was there a breach of that duty? That would be a jury question. And did the snow on the top of the vehicle, was it the proximate cause of the damage or other accident? And were there damages? So is it foreseeable that when you have a snow-covered vehicle that it's going to fly off and create a catastrophe? I don't know. If I was on the jury, I would say no. Now, on the other hand, failing to scrape your windshield, remove the ice, and have a legally required degree of visibility is a good example of not using reasonable care.
Sure.
And let's think about this. Operating a vehicle that you shouldn't operate in inclement weather could not be reasonable under the circumstances. So, it's something that everyone needs to take serious because, unfortunately, and I don't remember the totals, but in looking at this morning at the office, I mean, there have already been a number of fatalities and deaths across the state of Tennessee. So, it's really important to not be tempted to want to go to the store, want to go get that loaf of bread, that 6-pack of beer, and just use reasonable care. Drive when you should, don't drive when you shouldn't, and just be safe.
We want everybody to stay safe. We're so glad you could be with us today. And let's talk more about this coming up at 5:30.
I look forward to it.
All right. We'll see you then.